All right, so before we get into the John Gooden interview, I just quickly wanted to say, because I didn't say it during the interview, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. All the audio links for the podcast are in the description down below. So if you just want to listen to the audio of the interview, you can use one of those links for a podcast platform that suits you best. That suits you best. The other thing that I quickly wanted to say is, during this conversation, we was doing it on Zoom, and I used my phone as my webcam because it's a lot clearer, but my phone's on like a tripod up here, and then my laptop's down here, right? So it's down here. So as I was talking to John, I'm looking at the laptop because I'm looking at John, but like it just looks like I'm looking down the whole time, which isn't great. So I need to look at that because it's the first time I've ever interviewed someone on the channel. And secondly, my webcam was proper jittery the whole time. It's so annoying. Like I keep freezing and stuff like that. So it is what it is, I suppose. Do you know what I mean? Just focus on John Gooden's face. You don't have to really look at mine because I'm gonna keep freezing, and it really annoyed me. And I was looking at it during like the conversation, and I'm thinking, I hope this hasn't been picked up on the recording, but obviously it is because it's recording the screen. Do you know what I mean? But anyway, that's enough of that. Let's go straight into the interview. Right, hello, Battle Campers. So look, this is my first ever guest on the channel, and look who I've got. I've got the man, the myth, the legend, John Gooden. John, I think your nickname should be John Heezer Gooden, because you are.
Hey.
I really enjoy your work, so thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much. I think my old headmaster used to say John Baden. Terrible gag that clearly scarred me many years on still.
Why did he used to say that? What, was you a naughty boy at school, were you?
No, not really. Just every now and then. I think I was so good that when I was bad, it used to flag up. But no,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I can't
don't know.
That.
Yeah.
Anyway, how you doing? How was Christmas and that?
Yeah, I mean, Christmas was a little funky for everyone over in the UK, I guess, and maybe beyond. But you make of it what you can. I'm lucky that we have a daughter that's 2.5, so she really is enjoying the festive stuff. So we focused on that really, and just we just tried to have as nice a day as possible. If I'm honest, there were no major arguments that there normally are, and the tensions of having to deliver for the folks and the in-laws. So it was a little bit more low key.
Yeah, same here. It was just the kind of immediate family at mine as well. So it's not usually we have cousins and stuff, extended family around and whatnot. So yeah, it was different, but it was still enjoyable. So can't complain. We're still here, I suppose.
Yeah.
So look, obviously, so just so the people know, you did an AMA on Instagram, Ask Me Anything, through your Instagram story. And I was cheeky enough to ask you to join me on my channel, and you obliged. So thank you very much for that. And
It's all good.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before we started, and I just wanted to kind of just go through your journey, really, because I've been a fan of yours, and I really enjoyed your work and the way you present yourself. And it's really evident through your commentary style. You're just a big fan of the sport, much like us and much like the people that watch this channel. So I suppose the best place to start is just by asking you, when did you first become aware of the sport? Like, how did you become a fan of mixed martial arts?
So I've always been into martial arts. So I guess the kind of fundamentals and the interest and intrigue in combat's been there since I can remember. But I wasn't someone who tuned into UFC 1. It was more seeing, like, maybe it was around the UFC 38 where the brawl in the hall, and around that sort of time period. And I had a couple of friends that were doing Muay Thai and were into MMA and were bringing my attention to it. So I've always been someone that's enjoyed participating more than spectating typically. Mm-hmm. And as someone that was I've done a bunch of martial arts in the past, and in my late sort of teenage years, I was involved in boxing. So I was just always looking for another thing to dive into. So really it came from the interest was like, okay, I've seen this, I've watched it, but now I want to try it out for myself because, it looks pretty tasty, and let's see how I can enjoy this and all the rest of it. And it just sort of grew from there, on and off, if I'm honest. It wasn't like once I saw it, I'd locked in and this was going to be a career. In fact, I never ever thought this would be a career until probably only about 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah, we're going to come to that. So you were kind of just more a fan of actually participating in the sport, and you kind of organically got kind of more involved in the broadcasting side. So what was the first kind of gig that you did in terms of just being in front of the camera, or just being a voice of the action going on?
Yeah, so I can't really remember if the first involvement, I think, was less in front of the camera and commentary. I think I was doing some report writing and doing some stuff for blogs and things of that nature, and involved in, getting involved in the forums and stuff like that way back when. But I mean, to directly answer your point, the first time I ever put a microphone in front of my face was for my coach's show, which was called KO MMA, which was here in Watford. And he had just taken over a show from another partnership that were doing something that was called something slightly different. And we had it was basically a team show, although we brought they brought competitors in from all around the southeast. It was essentially my coach trying to give opportunities to his fighters, because a little thin on the ground, as is grassroots MMA right now. But there was a channel called LA Muscle TV way back when, like channel 451 or something.
Wow. So an actual TV channel, and like Sky.
Yeah.
TV? Okay, I don't remember.
Well, yeah. Well, certainly not like Sky TV, but it did exist on a channel somewhere. And they sent a presenter down to do some backstage stuff. I think LA Muscle had sponsored a longtime teammate of mine, Hayden Critchfield. And they sent someone down, and, she didn't know anything about the sport. And the way she represented it wasn't great. And already by this time, I had some ideas and some thoughts and some frustrations about the way that mixed martial arts was being presented in the UK. And I thought, through many years of having a desire to be a TV presenter, like in my early 20s, it was something that I did actually try, and it didn't come to anything. So it sort of piqued my interest that there were better ways to do this. And so when she did that, it made me go to my coach and say, look, I think I could do a better job than what she did. Give me the chance to do what she did at your next show, and let's see how it goes. But we didn't have any say in what LA Muscle were going to put on their network. So what my coach came up with was like, look, we could maybe put a couple of cameras on the cage, and you could do some commentary, and it would just make things a little bit more interesting for the fighters. It would give them something to look back on, to help them improve their skills, not through my commentary, but just looking at their own performances. And so that was the direction that we went. I then did commentary for him, for his shows through like 2009, 2010, maybe beyond. And it was just me, headphones, a microphone. I've got the dictaphone like up there in the corner. You can probably just see that shiny thing right there. That was the very dictaphone that I used for much of my work that I did in my early days.
So can I ask you a question? So when you first started in the commentary gig, and obviously it's a small show because it's a kind of a regional kind of show that you're commentating on, but you're in the booth by yourself, right? And I'm assuming you're quite early on in your journey as like practicing, different forms of martial arts and stuff like that. So when things were going on, how were you calling the action in terms of understanding what's happening in front of you to enable you to explain to an audience what's going on? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, technically, I'd been studying. I did judo since I was 7. Then I did karate. Then I did boxing, like amateur ABA stuff. So it wasn't like I didn't have a clue. And by this point in like 2009, 2010, I was training pretty hard. So I did have a decent understanding of the basics. I'm certainly not going to say that I, even now, totally proficient like a black belt would do in foreseeing what's going on before them. But then what you got to do is play to your strengths, right? And I knew more about some aspects than others. And I've always been very, very keen on the human side and telling people stories, because essentially you've got two athletes that are competing in front of you, and that is entertaining enough. You don't really need me to do much there. If you like the sport and you like combat, then whatever you see before you is going to really take care of that. I'm just layering it and looking to make that more entertaining in some way sometimes. But what I will try and do is help you understand the individuals that are throwing those kicks, punches, or trying to submit you. And that will then help you identify with them, dislike them maybe, like them even more, so that you will have an opinion on them as an individual, and you might therefore continue to support them in their journey. So that was something that I'd identified very on, and that is still the core of what I do for commentary to the day.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I don't know if you ever watch wrestling, JR, Jim Ross, he's, you know, a very talented commentator, and he always says that
a legend.
Yeah, the wrestlers make the music, and I just put the lyrics to the music. So I suppose that's kind of what you were driving at with what you were saying. So moving on from the regional circuits, obviously you went from your friend's organization, which I believe was called KO MMA, and then you moved across to, was it Cage Rage, was it, or Cage Warrior? I can't remember now. I did
Cage Warriors. Yeah. So I went on to Cage Warriors, and I did a couple of other shows here and there. Shock and Awe was one that I was a sort of a regular feature with. So got the Cage Warriors gig on the back of the KO MMA gig, because this is where the luck comes in, right? You have to sort of make your own luck and take advantage of it, but this is the lucky part. So basically, when I was getting a fight card from KO MMA, typically, as these things happen on grassroots shows, you'll get a number of fighters from a single gym.
Yeah.
So I would identify a couple of gyms, and because there's no great backstory, and at the time people weren't using social media like they are now, this is over 10 years ago. So in order for me to understand who these people are and to tell that story that I was just referring to, I needed to meet them, really speak to them, or send them a questionnaire for them to fill out. And it was just easier for me to actually visit a couple of gyms. The MMA clinic in London was one of those gyms. So I would call up the coach and just say, look, can I jump in on a session? Come down, you got a few guys, let me train with you for a day, or, you know, a couple of days, and then I can just see how things are done, and I can understand the coaching style, more about the genesis of the gym and the individuals within it. So that really helped. So I would go down, and all of a sudden it's like the brotherhood of mixed martial arts. We're all just martial artists, or I'm not there to prove anything or in any, you know, do anything other than just participate and learn from a technical standpoint, but also from a commentary standpoint in who are these people, what do they do, and why are they doing this? So that's essentially what happened. And while I was there, a gentleman by the name of Graham Boylan, who heads up Cage Warriors, still does, just said to me, is this something that you're a freelancer for? Would you want to do my show?
So
and he was doing
at the MMA clinic gym. Is that where you met him?
He owns it. Yeah, he owns the MMA clinic. So he had his own show, very much like what the KO show was. It was a show pretty much for the benefit of his own fighters, which then developed into Cage Warriors. Or Graham bought Cage Warriors, got brought in, so he then discarded his own show and turned his attention to Cage Warriors. And I'm very grateful that he kept me on. He could have had the pick of anyone in the UK. Cage Warriors is already a very established force and brand within mixed martial arts in Europe. So I was a very lucky boy.
So during those shows like Cage Warriors, what are some of the kind of standout kind of names or fights even that kind of really stand out in your memory of your time there?
Well, I think you've got to say there was someone called Conor McGregor who came up. So yeah, he was one. Joe Duffy. They actually fought one another back in the day. There are many, many fighters have come through the Cage Warriors cage and have gone through onto the UFC. They've actually, the numbers are pretty ridiculous now. Scores, if not, I don't know if they've approached 100, surpassed it. Probably need to look at that. But there's a great many people that have fought at Cage Warriors maybe once or twice, or got a belt there and have gone on and done damage in the UFC as well. So I had some really good experiences there. I was traveling with them, and I think people underplay that a little bit. It's difficult enough to learn the ropes, but then to add travel and a shift in time, a shift in environment, so you don't have like a home ground. The HMV Forum in London sort of was a home ground for Cage Warriors, but they did so much on the road as well that
where was that? Is that Kentish Town? Is it the HMV?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, so we were there quite a bit, but I think they went to Jordan like 7 or 8 times. I went there a good few times as well. I went to Chechnya. I was in the Ukraine. I went to Beirut. I mean, the list goes on. Places in Ireland, different spots in Ireland as well. So it was a really good experience to be able to do that. So you're ticking a lot of the boxes that someone who would do the UFC are doing.
Yeah,
but at a different, a much lower level of audience and production value.
Yeah, but the framework is similar, traveling around to different cities and doing shows in different environments, I suppose.
Yeah.
So at that point obviously you were, when you first joined Cage Warriors, did you then have a co-commentator to work with alongside, or were you still a one-man band for a certain extent?
No. That I was, and even when I was doing KO MMA, we would pair up with like someone who was on the team, a very good friend of mine, Dave Waters, who I ended up training with in different places as well. He would join me at KO MMA, and then I started out with Ian Butlin, who's a bit of a Cage Warriors legend. He's still very much involved in mixed martial arts internationally. He does a lot of work with M1, and beyond that as well. He's up in the north of England and continues to do great work for the scene. But then Josh Palmer got an opportunity with Cage Warriors, and we ended up becoming sort of the established partnership at the time. Josh is still with Cage Warriors. He does a lot of the grappling work as well for some of the biggest, like Polaris and things of that nature. He's stateside now, but we became a team that worked, I guess, because they kept us together and they kept giving us work. And yeah, I learned a lot from Josh. We found our groove together as two guys that would, we could only look above us at the UFC really, and guys like Mike Goldberg, and for me, Mike Chiavello, and Mauro Ranallo a little bit, and just look at what those guys were doing and try and, see what notes we could hit as a partnership.
So at what point were you at in your kind of personal life during this period? Were you still working a full-time job? Like,
for sure. Yeah. So I've been with my wife for over 10 years now. We're coming up to 10 years married. So I think 13 years. So she met me when I was training and had aspirations to compete in mixed martial arts. So she's been around for that journey. But at the time I was part of the family business as an electrician, and I would work, really hard. It's a tough job, that one. And also running a business with your dad has its own challenges, and you're always on, it's a 7-day-a-week deal. So there was a lot going on, and the balance wasn't always there, shall we say. But yeah, and of course, I'm still trying to train. I suffered a run of unfortunate injuries, but I put my back out real bad. It took me off the mats for, largely 5 years. Wow. But now when I look at that, if I hadn't have suffered that injury, then I wouldn't have been putting so much effort into areas in which I could help the sport of mixed martial arts, including commentary. And so, almost maybe a blessing in disguise. One thing I never really got to see what I could do in the cage, which, eats at me every day. However, I probably not every day, but I'm maybe over that now. But at the same time, I think that I was never going to raise the profile of the UK through fighting itself. But I'd like to think that I'm part of a group of people that are trying to change the opinion and bring mixed martial arts to a wider audience, in recent years.
So actually, so when you were training, it wasn't just for the sake of training. You actually had an ambition to actually compete.
Oh yeah. I've, you know, if you're going to train as hard as one does, because you can't mess around with MMA. And listen, there's still a part of me, if I could get a training camp together, there's still a part of me that thinks, well, maybe I could do like a charity thing against someone who's a similar age to me, similar spot, and I could give it a go and see what I could get out of it. Maybe I could do some inter-club stuff. These things still
Really?
go around. I'd love to do. I probably will be, if it wasn't for the pandemic, I would have been grappling competitively this year. That was something that I set out to do at the beginning of 2020. So yeah, I think I've always competed in sports, whatever it might have been. Yeah, whatever I've turned my hand to, I'm ultra competitive. So I'd like to see how I could do. And MMA is no different.
Okay. So you're at Cage Warriors. When does the call from the UFC come? How does all of that come about?
Yeah, so it's a mad old time for me because I wasn't really enjoying my job so much, the challenges of it. It was going to be a long slog into retirement doing what I was doing. The money was okay, but yeah, it was difficult and challenging, and I'd found this vocation, this thing in mixed martial arts there was a lot of work in my eyes. It still is a lot of work that needs to be done for where I think a lot of people would want it to be, so that these athletes can earn the money that they deserve at all levels of the game, and the coaches and everyone's looked after, and the infrastructure's solid, and it gets the recognition from other sporting entities as well. So, and we're getting closer, but we're still a long ways off, I believe. But we're still only a young sport. Anyway, I saw that there's all of this work to be done, and would love to be a part of that, help it in some way, because I was ingrained in it, and I was getting a bit of a foothold in the sport. I had a voice through Cage Warriors and Shock and Awe, and also maybe just I was doing something called, I was involved in an initiative called Safe MMA, which was a medical initiative to improve that side of things as well. So I had a finger in many different pies, if you like, but none of this was paying the bills, and that didn't matter. But it would have been nice if I could turn all of to it and also earn a living from it as well, and give it my full focus. The Cage Warriors gig, funnily enough, had gone away. I'd run out of holiday time. It was around October in 2013, around that September, October. And I'd gone to Cage Warriors and said, look, I can't take any more time off. It was becoming a challenge as well because, as much as my wife was supporting my efforts, we weren't going on holiday because I wanted to go and call fights. I wasn't going to weddings. I was missing birthdays, anniversaries, funerals, all of the big significant moments. Typically my attention was elsewhere and losing friends over it and whatever, and collectively then it's affecting our social life. So she was probably getting a little bit frustrated with that, and at the time it wasn't giving me any money either. Like if I was breaking even, I would have been lucky. Yeah. So I went back to Cage Warriors and just said, look, can you hook me up here? I can't take any more time off of work, so that means I'm going to be losing money. If you can just cover half of what my day rate would be, or 3/4 of it, then I can come down and do this show. And they weren't willing to do that. So there was a moment there where I was like, oh my God, I think everything that I've just been doing, I actually think that it all could be in vain. I think this all might be disappearing in front of me. And I went in a bit of a tailspin, but I was lucky enough to be involved in the sport to have made some contacts and connections, and some of those contacts had moved on to the UFC. So I picked up the phone and I spoke to an individual, and they said, your timing's very good right now. There's a new person that's at the helm of the UFC. I think you should have a conversation with them. Let me see if they'd be interested. And that person, Gary Cook, who was, really big in sports, he was
ex-Man City.
That's the guy.
Yeah.
But he was new. So I think he was keen to speak with people involved in the sport that would help him understand it a bit better. And so I got to have dinner with Gary, and I think he enjoyed what I said. I went with like pieces of paper, you know, full of ideas. And he said, "Oh, do you mind if I just take those sheets of paper?" Which was cheeky. But you know what? If it was for the betterment of the sport, then take it, because you're in a position where you can do something with it. I wasn't. But things sort of transpired from there. I now had dialogue with the UFC, and I got a gig doing a Q&A at the Manchester event. I then appeared on BT Sport, which wasn't actually a very positive experience in terms of the feedback. But on the back of that,
Sorry. What was wrong with your appearance on BT? What was the appearance on BT Sport, and why wasn't it positive?
So I went down and did a Q&A for a card. Michael Bisping was supposed to be headlining, but then injuries struck or whatever, or the fight fell out. So I do this Q&A, which was very cool. Like McGregor was there, Poirier was there. Was Gustafsson there? Gustafsson and Bisping, I think. And then they dialed in Dan Hardy, funnily enough, Vitor Belfort, Rory McDonald. I think it was just those three. And they had like a live crowd.
Everyone was individually on stage with you, or all kind of?
Yeah. So you had the guys. So Dan, Rory McDonald, and Vitor had dialed in. They're on screens. But then we had Conor, Dustin, Bisping, and I'm pretty sure Alex was there as well. They were there. And then we had a whole bunch of fans. A couple of Octagon girls were there as well. I remember Carly was there. So I was sort of moderating. I was hosting the thing. I went down in my Dickie bow and the suit that I wore to my wedding, did my hair all nice. I mean, it was a big deal for me. Like, I prepared for that like I'd never prepared for anything before in my life. And I was in front of people now. I think back to that. There's a certain guy who works with the UFC, he's very senior. He was there, he was there kind of taking care of this whole gig. And he's someone that's like, who I see now and is involved in all the big email chains. Just, you've got to take these opportunities. You never know who's watching. Anyway, it was a really good, fun event. And while I was there, BT Sport were in their new broadcast deal, were going to put on their own version of coverage of the UFC product. And I didn't really think about any of this stuff, by the way. I just got this opportunity to go down. They said, "Do you want to go down and be part of it?" They might just come to for your opinion a couple of times, whatever, open the show in the studio, but they're actually going to be doing most of it on site with Michael Bisping and Gareth Davies. And Gary Cook offered me like Octagon side tickets for that Manchester show. And
who was headlining that show? Do you remember who?
Oh, was it Musasi or who was headlining that show? No, it wasn't Russo.
Because I'm just trying to work out the time frame of when this was in my database.
This is like November. I think it was November 2013. Was it Mark? Oh my God, my mind is just completely gone. I can't quite remember the headline act.
I'll Google it.
We had a bunch of UK guys on there. I know that much because I was very familiar with quite a few of the fighters, which gave me a bit of confidence. So anyway, I turned down this great seat in Manchester and thought, no, I want to do the TV thing. I was quite upset that I'd been overlooked by BT Sport at the time for not getting any involvement in their coverage of mixed martial arts. It was the first time ever that we had a big network that were going to do coverage of the UFC and mixed martial arts, apart from Dave O'Donnell and OJ Borge did something called, I think it was called Cage Fighter, which was on Sky Sports. And, no disrespect to those guys, but it just wasn't the way that I wanted to see the sport promoted. And I saw this new era upon us, and they were overlooking everyone who'd been working hard in the UK MMA scene. And they'd given it to Caroline Pearce, who was new, Gareth Davies, who was doing lots of work with the UFC. So I understood that appointment for sure. But I thought, what about having someone on the ground, you know, a reporter? And there were a few guys that Jay Furness was doing a lot of stuff at the time. I was there. There were a few others, but none of us were getting a look in. So, so yeah, I was a little bit disappointed that I didn't get that job. So when they gave me this opportunity, I thought, no, that's where I want to be. So I need to go down there. But what BT Sport were doing was really they sort of tried to put their own spin on a UFC event and the way that it was produced. And the fans kind of went crazy, right? Because they were used to the product. They were used to hearing Mike and Joe. And there was just a way, it was just very familiar.
Well, I mean, just from a fan's perspective, watching it in the UK as we do, it's literally just the American broadcast. We don't really have any UK people
exactly
before and during or after fights and stuff like that. So yeah,
exactly. So BT were only doing what had been done in sports all over the world, you know, over time. But I think they didn't realize how passionate the fans were about certain things, and I didn't really know what. I literally went down there and I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? They said, well, you can talk about the rules of the octagon at the start. We might get a couple of thoughts at the beginning, and then, you know, we'll come to you once the thing's done and you can give us your thoughts then. I'm like, cool. I get to like have a look at the studio and stuff. But what ended up happening was they kept coming back to the studio on walkouts before the decisions were called. And it was just me because no one else, something had happened. So it's just Caroline and I in this big studio. And no one knew who I was. I realized at that point, UK MMA fans were very different from UFC fans. And UK MMA fans were a small percentage of the UFC fan base. So again, something I'd overlooked. I hadn't really overthought any of this. And as a result, I got a lot of heat because they didn't know who I was. People didn't respect my opinions. And it actually shook me to the core. I was like, oh no. I really think I've fluffed it here. I didn't see anything wrong with what I was saying, and I stand by a lot of the points to the day of what I was talking about. But I took an opportunity, and it just wasn't very well received at the time. And the, you know, BT were trying to find their feet and find the best way to work with the UFC products. And yeah, I thought I was going to be a casualty of that, but fortunately, that wasn't the case. And rather than be a pundit or a pundit, I guess, or an analyst, I ended up getting the call from the UFC about becoming a commentator. And just towards the end of the year in 2013, beginning of 2014, I did some screen tests, and I got a call when I was I was in a conservatory in Northwood. And
nice area,
the call came through. It is a lovely area. It was a lovely house. I remember it well. But I remember, I got in the van after, and I was like so emotional about the whole thing that I'd been offered this opportunity. You know, I still wasn't going to be able to give up my day job, but, you know, there wasn't no one had reached those heights to that point from the UK at that time. And I was going to have a chance, you know, so that was massive for me. Yeah, really big.
It's validation, isn't it, for all the years of hard work and whatnot? It's just recognition of, okay, I am doing something right, I suppose.
Yeah, and another thing for people that are going through some stuff. So in October of 2013, I thought the Cage Warriors gig was over, and that was really big for me. Like I was giving up everything to do that. And, you know, it wasn't compensating me handsomely, shall we say. So it really was for the love. And again, that's okay, by the way. But still, it took away something that was becoming a part of me. So I was really upset. And then I made a couple of calls and I started to get some dialogue going. I'm like, great, well, I'm glad I made those calls. I got these opportunities. I got to the BT studio. And then after that, I was physically shaking for all of the negative feedback that I'd received on social media. It wasn't something that I was prepared for. And again, I thought it was all over, you know. I thought those Mike Goldberg words were ringing true.
Just like that.
So just like that. So I thought I was done. And then, you know, you give it another couple of months, and then I get offered the opportunity that I really wanted, and that was to call fights, to be a commentator. So I'd gone through this emotional roller coaster, needing didn't need to put myself through that. Should have just stayed the course, and I probably would have had a few grayer hairs, maybe would have retained some hair. And yeah, but it worked out, and I got an opportunity. And I think that's what, so the lesson in that is, you know, some things are just outside of your control, and you never know what's around the next turn. It could be the biggest opportunity of your life.
So what was that phone call like to your missus when or did you tell her in person about this new gig that you got with the UFC?
Yeah, it was great. It was great to share that. You know, that, and my friend Will, who had kept me going on this, because there was a time where I was about to give up, even when I was doing the Cage Warriors stuff. A couple of my friends, you know, Will and Steve in particular, were really big sort of cheerleaders for what I was doing, and you got to stay with it. You know, Justin as well. I'm going to be, you know, missing out all sorts of people here, but yeah, I had a key circle that was saying stay with it, and it's difficult for my wife because, you know, it was taking away all the time that we would have, and you know, I was not young at this point. We had a mortgage and bills to pay, and we wanted to start a family, and I was, you know, looking at what seemed like a pipe dream at the time. And yeah, I think she was actually quite inspired after all of this, that, oh my God, you did it. Like, you actually did this. You pulled this off. So yeah, I think I inspired her in some way as well. And she's you know, she's written her own book since, which is hopefully going to be released very early on next year. So, you know, it's, anyone can do anything, you know, if they put their mind to it.
That's good. So you obviously then you were focused more around the kind of European events. So that was maybe what, 4 or 5 events a year or something like that. With the
yeah, probably about that.
Yeah. So like you were still working as a Sparky. So when was the moment where you could say to your old man, listen, I'm going full time with the UFC?
It's a long way in. It was like 4 years in, maybe. Was it 4 years in?
So just a couple of years ago, basically, then.
Yeah, because I mean, my duties with my old man were getting less and less. I mean, I still, to the day, I still have like daily conversations with him about his business and offer him some advice. And every now and then I'll do something. And it was only a couple of years ago that I wasn't like what's called a QS. Basically, this is boring for people, but to be a practicing approved contractor, you need to have someone with all of the qualifications, and they get assessed and they overlook the work. And I was still going through those processes with my dad's company. So I was still very much involved in the quality assurance of his work up until a few years ago. So yes, it's just been, and that's okay. There was a sort of a part of me that feared that I'd never truly give the broadcasting my full attention until I cut the cord, my safety net, if you like. But I don't know if I would prescribe that for people. I think it's good. It's actually good to have a safety net sometimes, as we've learned with 2020. You know, if the UFC hadn't have done what they'd done, I would have been able to get my tools out and go to work and earn a living, and then hopefully join back up with the UFC team as and when the wheels got back in motion. But at the time, I just felt like my work as an electrician really did not help me in any way, shape or form as a broadcaster. You know, I'm in a room full of dust all the time, so my voice is not being taken care of. I'm getting knocks, and you know, I'm bleeding every day when I'm doing it. You know, and it can be a kind of a hazardous job. And I started to really get a bit nervous about all of those things. And I think it was because I was trying to convince myself that I 100% wanted to go and do something that was giving me a lot of joy rather than this daily grind on building sites. So yeah, but and I'm going to be doing my own video about this. I think you have to proceed with caution when you go for that, you know, follow your passion at all costs and this, that, and the other. No, please don't do that, because you can put yourself in a very bad position if things don't go your way, and it might not be your fault. I got lucky a lot. I had the skills set to kind of back it up, but I needed a lot of luck, and I needed to be in the right place at the right time to be where I am today. and not everyone can be in that place and be there at the right time.
Yeah. So moving on a little bit then. So kind of at in March, when kind of everything, just the whole world turned upside down, it was a UK show, wasn't it? So we were going to
Yeah.
get Edwards against Tyrone Woodley, and I assume you would have been on the broadcast team for that. What was your
Correct.
mindset at that point? Like, like, were you a little bit concerned that I might need to go back and get the tools out, like you mentioned, or?
Oh yeah. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I was already looking at all of that because, the one thing that that all I ever really wanted was to replace the income. So as I said, I was in my 30s, and I had a mortgage and bills and all the rest of it. So I knew what financially I had to make in order to live where we lived. And we do need to sort of live where we live because of proximity for my wife who worked in London, and family, friends, and all of that kind of stuff. So to stay where we are, I needed to earn a certain amount of money. So all I was really ever looking to do was replace the income that I had from being an electrician with one from broadcasting.
Yeah.
And I would probably get myself more time because I was working 7 days a week with my dad. So I'd gain time and just be able to do something that I truly enjoyed, and maybe stick my head up and look for some other different opportunities that might encourage me as well. So so that's essentially all I've really wanted to do. I've probably done a little bit more than that if I'm entirely honest with you. But then what I'm getting at is I need a certain amount of shows a year to be able to pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I don't get a certain number of shows, like financially I'm in a hole. So I was staring at that. And if you think I'd fortunately got an early show in the year when I went to New Zealand, which is good because sometimes my first show of the year is actually the London show, which is around February, March. So, and that's where I earn a bulk of money, a chunk of money that pays for the debt that I got into through January and February and will see me into the spring. So all of a sudden, all right, I got that in the bag, but thank God for that. But now, what am I going to do? How good are we going forward? So I had to look at it from a very adult kind of grown up perspective. And yeah, I was sort of rocking there for a moment thinking, all right, well, we are okay right now. But some things have happened over the last few years that have meant that, our finances have taken a big hit. So I was worried. And I haven't gotten to a stage where other broadcast networks in the UK even really know who I am. I don't feel like I'm some celebrated broadcaster and everyone's vying for my signature, despite having probably one of the most challenging jobs in sports broadcasting, if I'm honest. And I've only been told that by people who are in the know. So anyway, I mean, again, I'm not really, as I said, I'm not really in it for all of that. But when you come to times when you're staring at not being able to pay the bills, you're like, yeah, if I had lots of offers on the table to go and do something else in the short term, then I'd be good. And sadly, that wasn't the case in March.
So like when the show started getting organized and all of that stuff, and we heard about this Fight Island and stuff like that, were you kind of relieved? Were you informed, right, John, you're going to get this amount of shows? How did that all play out, kind of?
Yeah, exactly that. So Fight Island is developing as a notion, and I'm having dialogue with the UFC, of course. And I had the Inside the Octagon show that I do with Dan. So, let's say typically once a month. So I'm still interacting with people. And, I'm trying to feel the temperature of what the UFC want to do. So yeah, the Fight Island thing I realized was I was going to be involved, but there's the whole thing. Like if you register a positive test for COVID, you're not going. So you'll do all your research, you'll prepare like crazy, you'll get ready. But a positive test could just scupper everything. So that's scary, right? You do all of this, but that little test, that 30-second cotton tip up your nose can determine what, what's going to happen for maybe the rest of the year. Because again, financially, this was my opportunity to earn a chunk of money and a bigger chunk of money, right? Because I was going to be working not one show, I was doing a couple of shows, and I do producing work as well for the UFC. So I was doing that. And there were just a couple of other bits and pieces that I was doing whilst I was there to make the money up, if you like, but also to lend my voice to stuff and to hopefully, I'd like people to agree, add value. And just professionally, just keep developing and get my voice out there and be a part of mixed martial arts, the UFC brand in 2020. So yeah, I was very excited, and it made me grateful for everything that had gone before, because you do get caught up in these things. The job does have its own challenges, and these grown-up things like mortgages, having a child, paying the bills, what nursery we're going to send out, all of these things, they take over your mind space sometimes, and you forget just how truly lucky you are to have that seat and what it means, you know.
Well, they're responsibilities, aren't they, John? So they have to take over your mind. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, 100%. But sometimes what that means is you get caught up in the day-to-day stuff, and if you don't come back to that gratitude of, I have this wonderful gig with an incredibly brave, dynamic, forward-thinking company, and I'm surrounded by like a community that I've identified with for many, many years now. I've got great friends from them, and you know, I live my life according to like martial arts in many respects as well. So a lot of this stuff it just makes me feel good about myself, and I'm able to indulge in that again. And yeah, it was a good time. It was a good time to be alive when I got out to Fight Island.
Right. Okay. Look, I know you've been really gracious with your time, so I'm going to try and be quick with the next couple of questions, so you can get on with your day. One thing I wanted to know is, what is the difference for you being in a, just having Dan Hardy next to you, or being in a 3-man team? Like, the dynamics obviously are different. There's 3 voices rather than 2. Like, how do you manage that as a broadcaster?
Yeah, I think I overthought it when I was first told we were going to be doing a 3-man booth. I thought that I would be silenced a little bit, because it was about them, and it is about getting their voices out there more than people hearing from me.
Who were the two that you the first time you done a 3-man booth? Was it Felder and Hardy?
Felder and Hardy. It was a London event. So yeah, there was that, but really, the dynamic was good. It actually allowed me to think maybe a little bit more about what I was going to say, rather than being quite so reactive. I have calmer moments with the producer, who's always in my ear, because we got so much stuff promotionally that we need to get through, statistically, things of that nature. So it allowed a little bit of the weight to be taken off of my plate, which you can look at it in one way. You're not talking, so you're not being heard as much, or it's actually you're not doing as much heavy lifting. And so you have more energy to spend on the moments where it really matters. Not that there's anything wrong with a 2-man booth, by the way. I still enjoy those. I enjoy working with Paul on his own, or DC on his own. I did it with Brian Stan. Like, I can do it with however you want it to be done. They all have their advantages. And I'm not going to say disadvantages. I'm going to say advantages, because now you've got the opinion of 2 like killers, world-class elite athletes, a guy who's actually made the walk against GSP, and you've got Paul Felder, who's just done so much in combat sports as well, and understands the broadcasting, has got one of the most magnificent voices we've ever heard. So even his tone is nice to listen to. But the experiences that he's had through fighting, all so valuable and different to Dan's journey, his perspective from the US as well, as opposed to the European and the UK perspective. So now I can tap into all of that. And it's then, I mean, how cool is that? I get to choose the flow of the conversation, because that's my job as the lead guy, the play-by-play. Like, where do we want to steer this? Like, we're looking at this. Okay, we got an American guy here. He's from that part of the world, right? Paul, what is it like training in that part of the world? And what are those? what are those fighters like? What's the strong suit there? But he's fighting a UK guy like Dan. How did that feel for a UK guy to go up against? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it.
You can start looking at different narratives, even more narratives. When I go back to my time with Josh Palmer, a guy whose vocabulary is superb, one of the best vocabularies in combat sports, but he's never made the walk for MMA. He's never fought for a world title. He's never fought in the octagon. And I'm not knocking him for this, but as a lead guy, I can't ask him about those experiences because he can't talk about them from a personal perspective.
Yeah, that's not it's not a technical. It's not knowing the technicalities. It's the feelings and emotions of making the walk or facing someone, you know, of a certain caliber, etc. So I totally appreciate what you're saying there. So so just kind of moving forward, then I suppose, what are the kind of short-term goals and kind of aspirations in terms of, you know, your career with the UFC or in broadcasting?
Well, to keep my job, first and foremost. I love what I do. I always want to do more. I'd like to have, so actually you guys will soon be seeing a series of one-to-one sit-down interviews that I've been doing for the UFC. I've spoken with Tom Aspinall, Jack Shaw and Mason Jones, who'll be making his debut for the UFC very soon.
He's a current Warriors champion, is he not?
2-weight champion as well, you know. That's a very elite shortlist. Conor McGregor and Dan Hardy were the only other guys before him on that list. So Mason's one to watch. So I like doing those sorts of things. I'd like to do some of my own content as well and have some time to do that. I've always got ideas for projects. It's the execution I find difficult with the work that I've got on, and you know, family life, raising a child. My wife works as well, so it's a difficult balance. And really, it's just doing more of the same, getting better, and hopefully, and just being open to other opportunities that then present themselves. I've been working on. Oh, this is interesting, actually. Yeah, I'd like to do more for the UK MMA scene. Behind the scenes for a couple of months now, I've been trying to figure out a way to get money to struggling MMA gyms. And I thought I'd be in a better position to share some news right now because I've got a GoFundMe page that I haven't even shared. So it's going to be like a one-time thing, but speaking to some people, they're like, no, I really think you should establish a charity. So that takes a lot more work. There might be a delay on that. So I need to do more. I feel a responsibility with the voice that I have and the network of people that I have access to help the UK scene a little bit more. I haven't been at liberty to do that in years gone by, but I feel like I've got a little bit more. How do I put this? I've just got more freedom to do that now. So I'm going to capitalize.
Connections, I suppose, isn't it? So
that's certainly part of it. So I'm looking to do that. There's also like series, production series, like bringing film to screens as well. So there's ideas aplenty. I've just got to find some time to actually execute these things, and you know, keep my marriage intact, and and keep my daughter recognizing who that strange man is that walks through the door every so often. Fair
enough. Just quickly, man, how disappointed were you with the news yesterday about Edwards and the Khamzat Chimaev fight for a second time?
Dude, I've produced the features for both of those guys. So I've been I asked the questions to Khamzat about Leon, and I've asked the questions to Leon about Khamzat. And it's I worked really hard to even get to do those productions. It was very difficult to try and get crews together to go and visit both of those camps. So I've been working in the background with the UFC on these things. And this is what people don't appreciate with the UFC is so much manpower goes into everything. And then so many fights are falling out, and there are so many people that are adversely affected. Of course, it's 100% the worst for the fighters. And I was just going to get to that. But what I'm saying, even from a personal experience, I've sat down and looked into the eyes of Leon Edwards and seen him training the blood, sweat, tears, and how he's already coped with what was a very, very disappointing 2020. Probably for the, I mean, I you know, maybe I'm so close to the UK scene and maybe Leon, because I was due to call his fights, that I don't really see many people beyond that. But I got to think he was maybe the unluckiest guy in 2020, considering his position. And that just continues again. So, yeah, that sucks really bad. And also Hamzat, like, he's a guy that I actually went to Sean Shelby with when he was like 2-0 and said, look,
really?
Here's a kid. Yeah, I saw him in the gym training with Gustafsson and Ilir Latifi, Jimmy Manua. And every now and then there are people I noticed that are just different. So I said to Sean, like, keep an eye on this kid. He is special. And I wasn't wrong. And he has over-delivered, I think, on where everyone thought he would be. And he had an incredible 2020. But now not even he is immune to the inevitability of what will happen to you in the fight game. And here we are. So I'm very sad for both of those guys. It's a terrible ending to 2020 for Leon in the news, and it doesn't get started very well for him either. But fingers crossed, mate. You know, I know he's asking for another opponent on Jan 20th. I hope
he's calling out Jorge Masvidal on Twitter last night, which I quite enjoyed.
Yeah, well, why not? You know, shoot your shot. And he's in the news again. So yeah, let's see what he comes up with. And for Hamzat, you know, I know he's got an incredibly strong mind, and he's also got youth on his side. So, you know, this is a minor speed bump. It was a great opportunity for him. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
So, sorry, last question, man. I got to ask you this. Like, what did you see in Khamzat at 2-0 in the gym? Like, what was it that made you think, I better tell Sean about him?
Yeah, no one else I've seen has been able to take Ilir Latifi down. And Khamzat, a guy who was weight classes below that monster of a man, managed to take him down. He just looked different. You know, he moved well. I was also hearing the stories in the gym of this kid that was like, you know, giving trouble to all of these great fighters. And when a guy who's 2-0 is being asked to be paired up with the likes of Gustafsson and some of the other like guys who, you know, UFC fans might not recognize, but the All-Stars gym is full of very, very high level fighters. You know, he is a key part in their fight camps. So he's, you know, iron sharpens iron and all that. So who's this guy that everyone's using to get better and is giving them tough rounds and maybe beating them in these rounds as well sometimes. And, you know, that guy right there is like, okay, well, he's got a bright future. If he can stay fit, healthy and stay on course, then, you know, he's going to be special.
Well, right, on that note, John, look, I could probably talk to you for another 2 hours if I'm honest with you. I've got so many questions that I still want to ask you. But look, you've been so gracious with the time already. We've spoken for an hour, and I really appreciate you. And thank you for joining me on this channel. Thank you so much, John.
No,
I'll give you a big hug and a kiss, mate. Thank you. Cheers for that. All right, mate. Cheers. See you later, guys. Bye.
Nice one.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Bye. Bye.